Toxins accumulate in the food chain and get stored in the liver and in the fatty tissues of animals. The grain that we feed to animals is almost never grown organically. It's heavily sprayed. The bigger fish that eat the smaller fish will be more likely to have higher levels of toxins. Plants filter out toxins. Organically grown plants are your best bet to eat clean food without toxins. Now, how about the endotoxins? All food animals, whether they're from concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, or are grass-fed, organically ranged, free-range, regeneratively ranged, and in America, it's about 99% CAFOs, but all of them are killed in the same slaughterhouses. So when you hear a defensive meat eater say, I only eat organically grown grass-fed meat, well, it's killed in the same slaughterhouse as the conventionally raised cows. And when you cut open a dead animal, the guts pour out. Even the happy, organic, grass-fed, free-range, regenerative guts. So every surface in a slaughterhouse is contaminated with E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter, and all kinds of harmful bacteria. In the meat cases in your local grocery store, the cuts of meat are exposed to ultraviolet light to kill the bacteria and parasites. They don't have to do that with blueberries, naturally, because blueberries aren't filthy with harmful organisms, but they have to do it with sirloin steak. So hopefully it works and kills the bacteria, and certainly cooking will kill the bacteria, but these toxins turn into endotoxins. Endotoxins are the main component of the outer membrane of the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. Endotoxins are heat stable. You can't cook them out. And an article on endotoxemia in human septic shock concluded, endotoxemia occurs frequently in septic shock and is associated with severe manifestations of this syndrome, including cardiac depression and multiple organ failure. In other words, endotoxemia is dangerous. Endotoxin is also released when bacteria are killed by antibiotics. So a patient comes into the ER with a terrible infection, is given antibiotics. The antibiotics kill the bacteria, but that may result in endotoxemia, the presence of endotoxins in the bloodstream. Well, when people eat meat, they may kill the bacteria with cooking, but they're giving themselves a dose of endotoxins 3 times a day. Why would anyone want to do that? To give themselves the same health risk on a daily basis that would result from treatment for a terrible infection? As this study explained, endotoxins circulate in the blood at low concentrations in all healthy individuals. But will the foods we eat affect the concentration of endotoxins in the blood? Absolutely. This study measured the endotoxin concentration in the bloodstream of participants after meals that were fatty and less fatty. It found that it just so happens that diets with large amounts of saturated fat, animal products, and refined carbohydrate may induce endotoxemia more markedly than diets containing fiber-rich plant food. I mentioned earlier that there's arguably a 6th macronutrient. The macronutrients are what you need to absorb in order to live, and you can't live without optimism. So optimism was discovered to be the 6th macronutrient according to, let me see, it's in my notes. See. Oh yeah, it wasn't a study in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was according to me. And so you have to ask yourself, do you feel more optimism when you look at fruit trees or at a confined animal feeding operation? What leads to more hope? The smell of fresh bread or the smell of a pig waste lagoon? What makes you feel more joy in being alive? A farmer's market full of fruits and vegetables or a view of dead chickens on a motorcycle? Forests or barren land burnt by cow grazing? If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find an interview I did with Dr. Silas Rao, whom I call the avatar of optimism. I hope you'll take a few minutes to watch that, because what we're trying to do here, the seemingly impossible goal of transforming the world to be vegan, to be a vegan, nonviolent place, is an optimistic undertaking. And so it's a healthy undertaking. The healthiest activity you can engage in is in trying to create a more vegan world. It may seem hopeless sometimes to convince others to go vegan, but it takes hope to try, so it's a healthy thing for you to do. Okay, remember this study that I said I'd come back to? Vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems. Well, believe it or not, there have been at least 23 studies on the relationship of the vegetarian or vegan diet to depression. And they all tend to contradict each other, with many finding no relationship between a vegetarian or vegan diet and depression, and some finding increased depression among vegetarians and vegans, and some finding increased depression among meat eaters, and a beneficial effect on mood to the vegetarian or vegan diet. I know this because naturally a study was done of the studies. Let me repeat that because I didn't misspeak. A study was done of the studies of the rate of depression among vegetarians and vegans. It's called a meta-study, a study of studies. These people are fabulous at creating work for themselves. And what the study of studies concluded, unsurprisingly, is that there is a need for more good studies, since 3 of the 4 studies that were considered the highest quality studies showed that vegetarian diets are associated with a lower risk of depression. Clearly, more research is necessary on this very pressing issue, or we may need a study of the meta-studies, or else I may just fall into a depression. So, where did that nonsense come from about vegans and depression? It essentially came out of thin air. Let's return to that alarming study. Let's analyze this language now. Vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems. Well, no, as the meta-study concluded, there's no real evidence that vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems, and the studies that were considered the best indicated the opposite. An optimal diet should be balanced. What does that mean? Everybody seems to be in favor of a balanced diet, just like everybody's in favor of a healthy diet. But what does it mean? Balanced how? Balance between healthy foods and unhealthy foods? Balance between anti-cancer foods full of antioxidants and carcinogenic foods? Or maybe balance between whole, unprocessed foods and processed foods? Half unprocessed, half processed, would that be a good balance? Half organic, half full of pesticides? What exactly is the goal here of balance? What does it mean? It's nonsense. Consisting of lean meat. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as lean meat. It's like clean coal. It's a marketing concept that doesn't exist. What's one of the problems with meat? It's fatty, and that fat clogs your arteries. What's the solution? Hire a PR team to advise you to tell people to eat lean meat. How many people go to the grocery store with a microscope to determine how much fat is in the tissue of the steak they're buying? The fat is in the tissue. You can't analyze it. You can't estimate it. You can't separate it out. Meat is fatty, period. Meat eaters always say, if you notice this, they always say that they eat lean meat. So then who the hell is eating the fatty meat? Answer, all meat eaters eat fatty meat. The next thing this advises is nuts. Well, there are studies that claim that nuts are healthy. Many of those studies are funded by the nut industry, but I'm willing to accept that nuts are healthy if you don't eat too many of them. But nuts are very fatty. So if you eat lean meat, which is fatty, and then you eat nuts, you're adding fat to a fatty diet. Okay, the next things are fresh fruits and vegetables. That's good. That's terrific. But then they go to olive oil, which is 100% fat, adding to the fat and the lean meat and the nuts, giving you exactly the kind of diet that creates obesity, which is an excellent way to get inflammatory disorders. So the diet they call a wholesome diet and an optimal diet is in fact a fatty diet that likely will make you sick and kill you. So now you've explained to your meat-eating friend why meat is unhealthy. And even if you convince them on the merits of the arguments, you find that most are reluctant to embrace health and quit consuming animals. These are some of the excuses that come up often, and you have to be prepared to answer them. So let's take them one by one. People have always eaten meat. You hear this one a lot. People have always eaten meat. The cavemen ate meat. Even assuming it's true, so what? We're trying to live to 100 in good health. The cavemen were trying to survive long enough to procreate at a time when getting enough food was a challenge, and you could be killed by a scratch leading to infection. Human sacrifice was also practiced back in the good old days. Do we want to bring that back too? Why should it be our goal to restore and perpetuate our primeval stupidities? Humans are omnivores. This statement raises a deep philosophical question. If you feed a rabbit bacon, does the rabbit become an omnivore too? It's true that most humans alive today make the mistake of living as omnivores, but in fact, we're natural herbivores, just like rabbits. I explained earlier how you can determine that just from the fact that we get atherosclerosis. Beyond that, when you compare and contrast mammalian carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores, looking at things like the gape of the mouth, the dentition, the presence or absence of starch digesting enzymes in the saliva, the length of the intestines, the acidity of the stomach, the chewing or simply swallowing of food, in every respect, humans line up with the herbivores. Not surprisingly, humans often choke on meat. We cannot eat rotting tissue the way carnivores can. We have hands for gathering plants and playing the piano. Carnivores have claws for grasping prey. Carnivores often eat just once per week when they make a kill. We humans need to eat more often than that, unless we're visiting the True North Health Center for a detox. We have canine teeth. This argument is so foolish that I'll let the images speak for themselves. Our canine teeth are no more intimidating than our molars. We can call our hands claws too, but they're not. This is just a linguistic fallacy. Sorry, I just like the taste of meat. Well, sorry, I'm not impressed and I don't care. First of all, tastes change and adapt. I loved going to McDonald's as a kid. I'd throw up if I ate that food now. Have your tastes never changed in anything? Music, books, entertainment? It'll probably take you a matter of about 2 or 3 weeks if you change your diet to start enjoying your new food and finding your old food unpleasantly greasy and salty and overly sweet. Secondly, do you really honestly like the taste of the hamburger? Or is it the bun, the ketchup, the mustard, the onion, the lettuce and tomato, everything put in the sandwich to disguise the taste of the meat? Because if you ate the meat without those plant-based condiments, you'd probably spit it out. Would you really not like your burger if you replace the meat with a portobello mushroom? I bet you'd like it better. You're just a creature of habit. It's a profound failure of imagination to think that your taste can never change. Anyway, are you really willing to get fat and sick and die young and not be able to be there for your loved ones while helping to destroy the planet in the process because that fried chicken is so yummy? The taste argument is just a remarkably shallow argument. Are you really going to argue that meat is unhealthy and may make you sick and shorten your life, and it's cruel to the animals and terrible for the planet, and you're sorry if you die and abandon your loved ones too soon, but you just enjoy the taste so much? Come on. Surely you're a better person than that. Eating animals is just part of the circle of life. Now, that's completely false. We confine and kill the animals. We eat them. We get heart disease and cancer. We die, and then we're confined to a grave. So it's actually part of the circle of death. If you think it's part of the circle of life, you're off by 180 degrees. Again, this is a way of trying to present as unnatural something. This is a way of trying to present as natural something that's profoundly unnatural. We're chopping back the Amazon to try to accommodate our insatiable desire for beef. How is it part of the natural circle of life to destroy a rainforest? Once you understand that humans are natural herbivores, that we thrive on a plant-based diet, it's impossible to make the case that there's something normal and natural about killing animals so that we can eat them. It's no more normal and natural for humans to kill cows and eat them than it would be for cows to kill humans and eat us. Both species are natural herbivores. I eat only organically raised, grass-fed, regenerative meat grown on farms run by loving stewards of the land who cherish their cattle. Now, nobody ever defends CAFOs. Everyone seems to hate them. Everyone seems to agree that they're environmental nightmares and they're cruel to the confined animals. But some will say that they eat only organic, free-range, grass-fed meat. That's a dubious rationale, and I doubt if anybody really adheres to it. Ask these same people if they refuse to eat meat in restaurants or to eat pepperoni pizza unless the restaurants and pizza places can prove that they source only organic grass-fed meat. And even the grass-fed cows are being sent to the same slaughterhouses as the CAFO bovines. So I guess those slaughterhouses have to be very careful not to mix up the confined slaughtered cows from the free-range slaughtered cows. It's going to be hard to tell the difference once the guts are spilling out. And I doubt if the workers in the slaughterhouse, who are often undocumented children, by the way, this is an industry that employs and exploits migrant children to do dangerous work and then pays fines as a predictable and budgeted part of the cost of doing business. I doubt if the poor children from Central America working in the slaughterhouses care about which meat was grass-fed. Also, believe it or not, grass-fed meat is even worse for the environment than CAFO meat because the cows take longer to reach their finishing weight if they're grass-fed. So they belch more methane. And when they graze, they burn the land and create deserts. Forests are chopped down to create grazing land. Forests aren't chopped down to build CAFOs. So we lose more trees and more forests and more good soil because of grass-fed meat than CAFO meat. About 1% of the meat consumed in the US is grass-fed. And if all the meat that Americans ate was grass-fed or regenerative meat, we'd need about 6 planet Earths to accommodate the demand. So this is a very elitist way to eat. There's no way everyone can do it while eating the kind of diet that Americans eat now. Just as the protein health argument is bullshit, so the cow manure environmental argument is anemic. Even Al Gore seems to want to make the case for regeneratively raised meat as somehow nurturing to the land. Would-be environmentalists bend over backwards and twist themselves into knots to try to construct some rationale to keep animal agriculture going. And the latest is magical cow manure. The premise is that the magical cow manure in regenerative farming helps retain carbon in the soil. And therefore, on so-called regenerative farms, where the cows are rotated lovingly from paddock to paddock, their magical manure fertilizes the land in just the perfect proportions to create healthy soil. Now, I've yet to hear the explanation for why cow manure is more magical than the manure of wolves or foxes or deer or elk or bears or rabbits, so I think we could disregard this foolishness. Humans would be wise to follow the lead of nature. And nature didn't create regenerative farms, it created forests and woodlands and grassy plains inhabited by more than cows. In fact, cows themselves were not created by nature. Humans bred them from oxen. Even on regenerative farms, the foliage that grows naturally has to be cut to give the cows grazing room. Wolves and other natural predators have to be killed, and fences have to be erected. There will be less biodiversity on a regenerative farm than on land that's rewilded. And the soil will retain more carbon on land that's rewilded.